So this is my presentation where I'll be talking about my fitness session and reviewing the different areas of the session. So throughout this review, I'll be talking about the strengths and weaknesses of the session itself, some strengths and weaknesses of myself as the coach during the session, any adaptations that I chose to make or that I was forced to make during the session, any changes that I would make to the session if I was to do it again, and also 3 SMART targets that I will set myself, including one short term, one medium term, and one long term. So to start with, I'll review the actual session and look at some of the strengths and weaknesses of the session. So the first strength of my session was that it was the correct length. Some of the previous sessions had been either too short or too long, and after hearing our teacher advise us about getting the timing of our sessions right, I feel as though I made sure that my session was long enough, and that each part of the session, so the warm up, the activity, and then the cool down, were all the right length. Another strength was that I included a risk assessment into my session. So before the session started, I did a PARQ, which allowed me to kind of see what situation all the participants were in. And it allowed me to understand their health status and if they had any health conditions, and also if anyone had any injuries that they were still suffering from. And I also carried out a questionnaire about their lifestyle, which allowed me to see their likes and dislikes when it came to training. So, for example, I could see if they enjoyed continuous training or not, and whether they enjoyed swimming more than running, so that I could then base the session around what they would like. And then the final strength of my session was the structure to it. So what I mean by this is I feel that my session contained all the necessary parts. So such as an introduction, a warm up, and then the main activity, a cool down, and then at the end the conclusion. And I feel as though it was important to include each of these sections because they all help to make the session more interactive and effective. And the introduction helped me to introduce myself, and I got to ask if anyone had any injuries, and also allowed me to ask people to take off any jewelry that they were wearing. And then the conclusion at the end helped me to wrap up the session and also to get some feedback off of the participants. And I did this by asking them to show me with their hands out of 5 how hard they had worked, and also out of 5 how much they felt the session targeted the area that I wanted to improve. But on the other hand, the session also had some weaknesses, and one of these was my session lacked any sort of competition within it. And so, after our previous sessions that other people had run, our teacher had reiterated the fact that not many, if any, of the sessions that we had experienced had any sort of competition within them, and that we should think about trying to add it into our own session. However, I didn't do this, and I feel that's why my session was perhaps not as good as what it could have been. And then the other weakness was the fact that my session maybe didn't hit the target area as much as it could have done. So at the start, my session was designed to try and improve participants' cardiovascular fitness, and I felt like I could have done that through my session because it was a HIIT. It consisted of various HIIT training exercises. However, after getting the feedback from the participants and the teacher, I understand that the session may be targeted more of the participants' muscular endurance rather than their cardiovascular stamina. So when I analysed my own strengths and weaknesses in terms of being a coach, I can see that one of my strengths was my organisation. I felt like I organised all of the relevant equipment that I needed quite well, and that all my drills were set up before the session started. And this meant that we didn't have to waste any time during the session for me to set up the next drill once the drill had finished. Another one of my strengths was my interaction with the participants in both of the groups. I felt as though I interacted well with everyone by encouraging them to keep going, praising them for doing well, and then also helping them through demonstration when they were struggling with how to perform one of the exercises correctly. And so, for example, I helped Ed and Isaac when they were performing the mountain climbers incorrectly, and I helped them by demonstrating what the correct technique looked like, and then they were able to do it properly themselves. And then the final strength was my communication throughout the session. I felt like I gave clear instructions from in the beginning with the warm up, and then with the main session and the cool down. And then when the participants were doing the exercises, I was communicating with them by, like I just said, I was motivating them and praising them. And then, yeah, like I said, the introduction I gave and the conclusion, I felt like showed a good level of communication with the participants. But however, like with the main session, I felt like there were some weaknesses to my performance as an instructor and coach, such as the levels of rapport that were included in my session. I felt that, like, although I interacted well with the participants, it was more of like a professional interaction because I was motivating them and making them perform the exercises correctly, rather than having a laugh and joking around with them and being like adding to the report kind of factor. And then another weakness was my planning. Like, although I felt like I had good organisation and that I planned a good session, some of the areas of the session I felt I could have been improved, and this was down to my planning. So, for example, I had some exercises that appeared in both of the circuits, which I didn't plan to happen because it could cause tedium. And then this could have been easily avoided by just adding more variety into the session and thinking of new exercises that I could have put in instead of those ones that were seen twice. So there were some adaptations in my session, some that were planned and some that I didn't plan on making. I was kind of forced into. The first adaptation was in the warm-up, and I had planned for everyone to be in one big area and play the game of ball tag. However, due to the two circuits being designed in a circle shape, I felt that it would have been better to separate the group up into two smaller groups and let them play the game of ball tag in their own area in a much smaller group, so that it doesn't take as long for them to complete the game. And then, as well as this, one of the adaptations that I'd planned came from in the exercises, and I'd planned for some of the stations to include progressions for those who found the exercise too easy, and then also some of the stations to be made more easier for those who were struggling. For example, at the press-up station, I stated that for those who found the press-ups too hard, they could perform them on their knees, or instead of doing narrow into wide press-ups like the station was designed for, just to perform normal press-ups. And then another adaptation was me having to change some of the exercises that were in my session due to us doing the session outside instead of inside. So, for example, if we were inside, I would have been able to use a bench in my session, and so could have included exercise like tricep dips. However, due to us being outside, I had to change this exercise into an exercise that didn't require any equipment. And so this is why some exercises appeared more than once, because I had to improvise. So if I was to do the session again, there would be some changes that I would make. And one of these changes would be adding more progression into the circuits. So, for example, adding weights to the exercise stations like squats, lunges, and sit-ups, as this would make the exercises more challenging and add more variety into my session, especially for those who found the exercises too easy, because they could then add the weight in, and that would make the exercise more of a challenge. And another change I would make would be introducing the idea of competition. So many of the participants were in pairs, and so adding this idea would have been very simple, because I could have just said within the pair the challenge to see who can perform the most reps at each station. And I feel like adding something like this would have made the session more enjoyable for the participants, and also increase the levels of effort that some of the participants put in, because they would have become more competitive and they would have wanted to try and beat their partner in the exercise. And then the final change that I would make would be adding even more types of exercise into the session. Like I already mentioned, I had some of the exercises that appeared more than once. For example, mountain climbers appeared in both of my circuits. And so if I was to do the session again, I would think of some more exercises that I could come in and replace the ones that appeared numerous times. So finally then, my SMART targets that I've set myself to help try and improve myself as an instructor and a coach. The short-term target that I've set myself is to try and help the participants more when they seem to be struggling with any of the exercises. So, like, if I was to do it again, I would try and help them more. And although I felt like I did it in a small amount during my session, I felt like I could have done more to try and help people within the group, and tried to get around to more people so that they can perform the exercise with the correct technique if they're struggling. The medium target that I've set myself is to try and expand my knowledge about the type of drills that I could do to help improve people's cardiovascular fitness. Because what I could do is I could then take these drills that I've learned and then think of new sessions and circuits that I could run for people, as this would mean that tedium is avoided because people are doing new drills and exercises all the time, and every session that they do is not going to be the same thing. And then the final target I've set myself is to try and do more sessions in the future, because I feel as though if I can practice like leading a session again and independently planning my own session, then I would become much better as an instructor. Because if I was to run a session to new people and to do more of it, then my communication and confidence skills would improve, and I'd also it would also allow me to get feedback from lots more people. And that's the end of my review.